I am Jordan Langness from Ishpeming, Michigan, a true Youper. I don't have to try to qualify that. So I didn't realize how much of a blessing it was until I saw what, someone was trying for. So just a little bit about myself, not that it's super important, but just so you can see that it's just, well, I'll get there. I've been called back to my home congregation. I serve as a youth and family ministry director. I've been there for a little over 5 years now. And I think that's about right. 6 years. I'm working on the 6th year, so something like that. Anyways, there is a blessing and a privilege of being back home. There's also plenty of challenges. But yeah, that's been fun. And I've been involved with youth ministry for, depends on when you start counting. Like if you count the Bible study that I was helping with in middle school, we're way north of 20 years. If you start officially, it's about 20 years. And over that time, I've had the privilege of getting to know some people here through professional capacity and others. And I'm just going to start by saying this, Eric, I don't know how you get away with slamming people as much as you do, and they still love you. But I want to warn you, I know you from when I was a little kid at camp, so you're the old guy to me. So the generation is coming, and you're going to be name dropped a whole lot. So I also have the privilege of working with AFLC Youth Ministries, and so I like to say that right now, tonight, I'm on loan from AFLC Youth Ministries, and I am wearing the shirt because I was told I couldn't present if I had my youth ministry shirt on. I thought the departments were working together on a unified vision, but we've got some work this conference, people. So that's a little bit of who I am. But to start, I say some of that backstory because I'm not special. And what I'm going to talk about is not because of anything that I've done. This hasn't happened because I'm the person that's there, but because of what God is doing. And we need to understand that. Because like Eric was saying, sometimes we do set the bar and we think that something's unattainable. Like, I can't do that. And when we do that, we're focusing on me, not on the one who all the power lies in anyways. And so we need to understand that it's not about me, it's about what God's doing. And I want to start by saying, too, that for probably a good 14 years or so of my time in ministry, I have to say, I don't think that I was really clear on what I was doing. Sorry, Jason. And what I mean by that is I understood the Great Commission. I understood, we're about making disciples, and my specific role is for the students, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I didn't quite understand what my role in that was. And this is when we think about the body of Christ stuff, right? We have people who look at the eye and say, I want to do that. And they don't realize, well, if they were busy being the eye, they weren't going to be doing the part that they've been created for, right? And so we recognize that there's different roles for people. And I want to set that as something to understand, too. So you might be hearing Pastor Eric, and you might be like, man, I wish I could do stuff like that. Maybe God's not calling you to do anything like Eric, because He's made you to do something totally different. So over the past years, there's some stuff that has happened to kind of solidify this in my mind. But really, I feel like I've got a foundation for my ministry now. And it comes from Ephesians chapter 4, starting at verse 11. It says this, and He gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ. And it goes on and talks about unity, and it talks about maturity and things like that. But recognizing, wow, if I'm in this position, in this congregation, and my role here is as a leader, a teacher, doing pastoral ministry, then the purpose of my ministry is to not do the ministry, but to equip the saints for the work of ministry, right? And I think big picture, if we understand this, Eric, you talked about pride, right? And I think this kind of ties in with that because, I'm called to teach them how to do ministry, but they're not as good as I am, right? In some ways, and then you have someone who blows you out of the water, and you're like, dang it, I shouldn't have been doing it this whole time. But understanding that foundation, then I started to look at my role in youth and family ministry through this lens. And how do we engage in our congregation and start looking at the people that God has put in our care to intentionally equip for the work of ministry? And so understanding the why then was really key in moving forward and starting implementing this. And I'm going to say this right off the bat. I don't have like this amazing track record that you should try to like mimic and try to, I don't think it's all that impressive. But God has done some cool things. So I'm going to be sharing about that a little bit here too. But as we also think about the why, there's also another layer that I think we have to understand. One of the things that I love about the AFLC is our emphasis on the congregation. Right? We have this understanding of the form of the kingdom of heaven on earth. The congregation is the right form of that right now. And God is equipping the congregation. He has gifted the congregation. He's working through the congregation. We have a lot of emphasis on the congregation. And in my youth ministry times, you hear a lot when you work with students about like the significance of what you do, and people try to encourage you, and it's like talk about the kids and how important they are for the future and stuff. And you hear about the kids are the church of the future. And I really loved in my time in North Dakota, Rodney, I talk about you a lot when I'm training seminary people through my AFLC job about a youth-minded pastor who sees the students aren't just a part of the future, they're the part of the church now, right? And I go beyond that. I know that's my lens, but every member of your church is a part of the congregation now. And that means that every part of the church is to be applied in this somehow, right? Every part of the church is to be equipped for the work of ministry. And we have to understand as we do this, what does that look like? What does this mean? How does ministry be lived out? And it's not going to just be being up front. It's not going to be the talker all the time, not maybe the worship leader or something like that. Sometimes being a minister in the congregation is being willing to sweep up after babies have had fellowship time. That is a way of serving the church and serving the body. And so how do we do the work of ministry? As I was looking at this, I had some things that kind of played a role in what I was going to be doing as well. And there's a couple important books. Dr. Kara Powell has come out with Growing Young, and in this book there was this concept about handing off the keys to the students. And I've seen this in multiple different areas, and some people might think that I'm a little bit of a rebel in some ways. Like I'm firm and, well, I shouldn't say so firm because I've paused it for right now, but I've been actively doing things that are kind of crazy, like saying, hey, we have our students, when they get confirmed, and we're like, congratulations, you're a member of the church now. Now keep on doing nothing until you get to be 18, and then you matter, and by that time, you're like leaving and not even able to participate. So we're going to send you off to be meaningful members of congregations without having any opportunity to experience what that's like. So I'm like, hey, how about we let people who are confirmed vote? And then I had some people like, well, there was this king in the Bible, and he went to his young friends and asked for advice, and it didn't work out so well. And then I found out they were likely in their 30s. And I was like, so you want to just say anybody who's 30? But I think that this has kind of been a part of this mentality of training and equipping, right? And I think that when we approach ministry through this Ephesians 4 mindset of equipping and training the saints for the work of ministry, it changes how we approach things, right? So for example, why would I want students to learn how to participate in a congregational meeting? How many of you would agree that congregational meetings are important as far as the function of the church? Okay, there's a few of you, all right? Some of you need to start going to your congregational meetings. It is really important for how the church functions. And if we have all of our students leaving and they don't get to see how this works, you can even take conference as a thing. If we have all these generations that have participated up until this point, we miss a young generation and we don't get them involved to see what does it mean to lead, to be a part of a committee, to be a part of a board, then eventually the experience is going to go away and you've got people who are just like, how do we do this? So we got to get them involved, right? And that's a part of this process. So how do we do that? Well, we give them significance. And there's another area for this mattering too. If you've been connected to youth ministry, you know that one of the challenges is how many students walk away. They get through graduation and then they're gone. And we scratch our heads and we're like, why? Why do we have so many students not even just walking away from our association, but walking away from God and the church? Well, how much do you care about something that's not yours? If you don't have leadership, if you don't have a role to play, if you're not really a part of it, do you really care about it? But if we start handing things over to our students and say, no, you have an important role to play. You're a significant part of our body now, and we want to train you, not just for this season of your life, but for years to come, then they start having a role to play, right? We'll get into a little bit as I finish up. My timer says 0, but I don't think it started there. Okay. I was counting on that. I was like, this is so cool. They have a countdown, and it's gone. So you're going to have to stop me, Randy. You do the land the plane thing for me, okay, when we get there. So looking through this and looking through this mindset of how do I train my students, the people that I've been given and entrusted in the ministry that I have. And sometimes it can make people kind of nervous. And there's another principle that's really important. And Eric, this goes well with what you said about setting the bar low. A little bit different angle, though, is having reasonable expectations. And I understand there's a tension with this, which fits us Lutherans really well, right? And here's the tension. We should do everything to the glory of God to the best of our ability with excellence, right? God deserves the glory of a job well done. I fully support that, and I think that that's really important. But does that get in the way of the messiness of giving people an opportunity? Are we so protective of our professionalism that we don't give people a shot? You know, you picked this up a little bit from what Eric said, and I would say the same thing about myself. My first youth Bible lesson that I led, probably wouldn't do that one again. You know, probably first couple of years, right? And think too, the first couple times that you were preaching as a pastor, do you really want to go back there? And yet we think that for some reason, we give someone a chance and they should be good right away. They're not going to be good right away, but they need to be coached. But if we don't give them that opportunity to give them a chance to practice, how do they grow, right? You don't get basketball stars just showing up on the court one day and like, wow, I make free throws. There's a lot of work and training and practice that goes into it, right? So why do we expect this to be different, right? But for that to happen, that means we have to be willing to live in the mess sometimes, right? We have to be willing to live in the mess. Now, we can be strategic. I'm not advocating for saying, you got somebody who's maybe interested in preaching, maybe a student, and you're like, Easter, ready, go, right? Use wisdom, okay? So maybe it's going to be like, hey, we've got these Advent services, and maybe an eighth of our church actually comes. Let's start there. But we've had opportunities in our congregation to see people do that. And I want to paint a bigger picture for you, especially if you're pastors, okay? The blessing of what God instructs you to do here. Because Randy was talking about how exhausting it is, sometimes just holding things together, right? Would you be blessed if once a month you didn't have to preach? And you had that time to maybe rest, maybe do some extra visitation, maybe some time with your family? Would that be good for you? Okay, there's a few that are like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Do you know if you have people in your congregation that you've encouraged to preach that that's possible? But it's not going to happen if we don't give them those opportunities, right? So this can be a huge blessing for the leadership as well. So here, that's kind of a little bit of the how. So here's some of the what that's been happening in our congregation. And I want to qualify this by saying this too. Sometimes these things happen in pockets, and it's not necessarily going to be the whole congregation. I am hoping and I'm praying that the things that we're doing in the youth ministry show the broader congregation what's possible. We're not there yet. I've been saying, this isn't a secret, but I've communicated that to change the culture of a church is possible, and it takes time. It's like steering an aircraft carrier with a tongue depressor. So I'm in it for the long game as far as that goes. But so here's some things. So we're thinking about, okay, if we're in a position of leadership, how are we going to equip the saints for those positions of leadership? If God has given us to the congregation, how do we help them to do what we do, right? So one of the things that I've done is I've established a youth leadership team. It's not a new idea. It happens many different places. But a part of being on the youth leadership team at my congregation is you're going to commit to some stuff, right? So right off the bat, if you apply on the application, you recognize you're going to be teaching one of the youth lessons during the year. I don't do this so that I can just have gaps in my schedule where I don't have to teach that night. My intention is, you're going to do this. I will walk with you. I'll help you figure out, okay, what are we going to talk about? And I'm going to help you figure out, how do I set up an outline? I will help you figure out, what do we do for visual aids? Do we do visual aids? Any question you have, I will be walking with you through that. And then you'll give your presentation, and I'll be there with my notebook in the back, and I'll be staring you down. And you'll be in front of your peers, and it's going to freak you out. And then the next youth leadership team meeting we have, we're going to, in brotherly love, we're going to tear you apart a little bit. We do have areas to grow, but we also have, here's some things that you've done really well. And sometimes it's going to be this kid, and I won't force them, because part of it's experience, right? So a kid says, hey, I think I'm ready. I was like, okay, do you have anything that you want me to help you with PowerPoint? No, I've got that. All right, what's your lesson going to be? I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions, so we're going to have great discussion. Okay. All right. And so this kid gets up there, and he's like, okay, so here's the verse. We're going to read the verse. And he reads the verse, and it's like, and what do you guys think about that? And it was silent. And so then he just jumped to the next question, and so he was thinking he was going to take a half hour, and we're 10 minutes in, and it's done, and that's including my announcements at the beginning. And he was like, But the other thing can also be possible. I've had students who've gone 45 minutes, and I tend to run a little long. And so after, it's been so justifying to be able to say, see, sometimes it's easy to lose that time, isn't it? They're like, yeah, I'm sorry. So it's been good. So they'll do a lesson, right? Now, my goal is not necessarily that I'm going to have all these different youth pastors that come from it. But here's the thing. They're going to have some experience. They're going to be able to go out from wherever they go, and they're going to be able to say, I've done that. I can do that. Maybe it's filling in. I had one, as it happened, this past year where it was youth group night, and my wife was not doing very well. We were having supper. She was like, I think you were lying on the floor crying. It was not going very good. And I was like, I've got youth group, and that usually takes me away all night. But one of my students is supposed to teach tonight. So what I did is I went there, and I did the first stuff, and I said, and this person's going to be leading. By the way, I'm going to have to record you because my wife is sick and I have to go. And we had other adults that were there, so I wasn't just leaving the kids to themselves. But, that was a blessing to be able to have a person who could fill in for that, right? And so God's been doing some pretty cool things. And some of the lessons that the kids have done, it's been so cool to see what God has put on their hearts to share. And another positive is, you might already be sick of hearing me. And I don't know how long it's been, but it hasn't been all that long, right? So my students, I get to be the same old all the time. But when you have a peer sharing with you, how powerful that is. And then the students see, hey, they do that. I can do that. And so for the first time, I'm having to cap how many people I'm allowing in my youth leadership team. So that's an awesome blessing to have. But another thing is we're going through it, right? We talk through the mission of the church. Our kids are bright. And it's been interesting to see because some of the students, when we were doing an evaluation thing of where are we strong? We want to celebrate what God's doing in that area. Where are we weak? And they're like, it seems like there's some good ideas. And the adults will say, let's do it, but then it never happens. And so the students were able to see some things that I'm looking at. I'm like, this is kind of an issue. I don't know if the adults are hearing it yet, but the students are seeing this. And so we're teaching them how to evaluate ministry, how to look at the mission statement and how does the mission drive what we're doing and having these conversations so that when they leave our youth ministry, wherever they go, they're going to be ready to engage in that process. And as a part of this, we had, for several years, we loved to get the team from the Bible school for our vacation Bible school. I think some congregations are just used to that being a part of the system. And so when we got rejected a couple years back, they're like, what do we do? But our students had been working alongside of those Bible college students for so many years, I was like, I bet our kids can do it. So I asked the youth leadership team, I was like, guys, would you be wanting to create our VBS this year? And they're like, yeah, which is totally different reaction from when you ask the adults. They're like, no. So I was like, okay, so let's try it. We ended up doing like a 3-day thing. We're like, we're going to make this a little bit shorter because you guys, you've helped, but you haven't really led it so much. So let's try it. And we had some options for what curriculum that was out there. Like, we want to do our own thing. So they picked the music. They choreographed the music. They made some puppet skits. They wrote the lessons. They did the theme. They did everything. And it was amazing. And our students did an awesome job. And then the next year, we applied for team, didn't get it again, and our kids are like, yeah, we got this. So again, we did 5 days that time, and they created the theme, they did the they did everything, right? And we were trying to, I was trying to get some adults to say, hey, let's catch up on this, and let's not have you just watch and say, wow, the kids do a great job. Let's have you be participating so you get to know the kids too. And so we had a few adults there. This year we're trying to have, through the Christian Ed Board, have the adults and the students working together. That's a challenge, because when the kids aren't driving everything, it's really hard to get that commitment. So we're seeing how it works. A couple of weeks we'll find out. But that was really cool to see our students do that. And again, they're capable. If our students are able to go to school and do calculus, we shouldn't be afraid of saying, hey, here's some theology to wrestle with, right? Right. And our students can handle the responsibility to, yes, use wisdom. But it was really neat to see them and to see the adults just like, wow, our kids are able to do this. And I look long-term too. And I think when they get to a congregation and VBS comes up, and there's like, well, who's going to do it? These students are going to be like, well, I've done that before. Yeah, I can help. And they're going to have this opportunity, right? So what a cool feeding system to prepare congregations, people who are going to be willing to serve. Some other things that have come out of that, we had one student who saw, our pastor who's currently serving there, really started bringing children's messages back. And we had one student who was just like, yeah, I think I could try that. So we did. And it was a disaster. His children's message went quite a bit longer than the actual message. And so the kids are sitting up there, and they're like, and he's like, so, and you think, okay, he's wrapping it up. But no, it was point 12. And then afterwards, so we had a little chat, and he's like, yeah, I just wasn't really prepared. And then we tried it again. So much better, right? And to see that growth between there. But this was a kid that you would have been, I met with him at McDonald's one time. He had his hood over his face, and he didn't say a word, which is really hard to do relational ministry that way. I don't know what I was doing, but to see that growth was awesome. Another thing that happened with last year, we had some kids, one student who is very creative, and he's like, hey, let's do some dramas for each of these days. So all of a sudden we had this student-created, student-led drama team that have been able to do multiple different things in our congregation, which has been awesome to see. And to see then someone who not only has a desire for a new ministry, but to have the runway to say, yeah, let's try that. And you know what? There's probably going to be some bumps. And there were some bumps. There were some things where we had to be like, okay, so maybe a Sunday morning service might not be the best time for this futuristic kind of analogy that C.S. Lewis does really well, but we kind of struggle with a little bit. But for other things, it's been amazing. And so it's really cool just to see the students given opportunities to chant, to flex their muscle, to not just do something that's a token thing, but to be really involved with genuine ministry and leading our congregation. And our students, because of that, understand that they have ownership. This isn't just a place they go, this is theirs for a lot of them, right? And there's still room to grow. There's still things that we can do to increase this. And I want to encourage you, this is supposed to be practical a little bit, maybe. as you think about your own congregation, don't think about what I've done, because this is something that God's doing at Hope, and it's not because of me. It's because of what he's doing in the group of students he's called together. But I want to encourage you, look for what opportunities are already there. And don't just think of the youth kids. Think of the young kids too, because they need to be recognized as a part of the congregation now. They have ways that they can serve. And it's not just like the jobs of, hey, we need someone to take out the trash. A lot of times that's what gets relegated to the youth, not so much the significant stuff. But some of the things that we did, we had communion, and we had these really, I'm sure there's a story behind them. One of the senior members of the congregation who's passed away, I'm sure he made them, but these stools on each side, and there's a silver bowl, and you drop your cup in the bowl, right? It worked. It was practical, very pragmatic. But you know what? When you replace those stools with really young kids, and they just get to sit there and look at people and smile, it made the kids have a role to play. They felt like they were contributing, and they are contributing. And then the older people love looking at the little kids too. So look for what opportunities are already there and invite people in. And the last thing that I want to say on that is this is a huge thing as far as discipleship goes too. The discipleship opportunities in serving together are huge. And I've been a part of congregations where I'm not trying to throw anything under the bus here, but I'm going to go here because I think it illustrates this well. Our WMF struggles to have people come, struggles to have people involved. And they will continue to say, like, well, even this congregation doesn't do it as much as my previous congregation, where they're not even saying, if you're a woman of this church, you're a part of this program. But they wonder, like, how come we're not getting new people in? And I'm sitting here like, well, when's the last time you invited them in? You know, not just for the coming to the meeting, but to serving together. If the WMF is a group that puts together the fellowship time service or whatever it is, why not have students on that team and serve with the older people? Get to know what the work is about and invite them into this process and invite them into these relationships and into this fellowship. And we have these older people then that can get to know our students. For some reason, there's like a fear of the kids have the older people because it's like, they're weird. Like, they don't know what I'm talking about when I say, yo, cool whip. I don't know either. Actually, I do know that one. But, and our older people look at our young people and like, man, they're weird. And I get it. Like, when you have earbuds in all the time, nothing says, don't talk to me like that. And so we allow these things to be barriers. But how can we break down these barriers and serve together? And the line that I give to my congregation is, with these relationships with adults and students, when we think about initiating them and starting them, who do we expect to be the adults? Do we expect the students to say, hey, I want you to like mentor me. I want you to do this for me. There's a place where we have to recognize, now we're the adults. We need to pull on our big boy pants or big women dresses. I don't know. And we need to initiate. That came out really bad. I'm not calling any of you women big. And this is why I have not broken past the glass ceiling of youth ministry. That's a thing. But, all right. Yeah, I think that's landing the plane. Yeah, I think that's about it. So it was a crash, but thank you guys.